Jack. You can't have it both ways. The fallacies in Genesis, the first book of the Torah, the Old Testament, which of course the New Testament is based upon. So, like any structure, like any idea construct, if the root beliefs are false, the rest of the structure falls apart. So, if Genesis is in blatant contradiction, even metaphorically, I've heard it's like, oh, Genesis is a metaphor for this and for that. It's like, it still doesn't make any sense. Anyway, if Genesis is incorrect, even if like just a few parts of it are incorrect, that apparently the whole damn thing is just another creation myth in the same vein as the Sumerians and Mesopotamians before the Hebrews, and there's some Egyptian influences in there as well. But still, if Genesis is incorrect, however severely, the rest of the text, for which monotheism as we know it is based, it falls apart. The whole thing falls apart. If Genesis is wrong, the rest of the whole thing falls apart. So you've got your fundamentalists, the evangelicals, and the Pentecostals, and whatever various forms of Christianity that are floating around. There's even really Orthodox Jews who take Genesis literally. And I'm sure there's a lot of Muslims who take Genesis literally as well. If Genesis is wrong, then the fundamentalists are without the rest of the thing just falls apart. Jesus died for, among other things, original sin. And according to the text, original sin isn't a metaphor for sin in general. It's referring to the Adam and Eve story, original sin, Eve being tempted by the apple. If that isn't true, then the rest of the book falls apart. And your fundamentalists are right in trying to push Genesis as being true and trying to come up with all this creation science, young earth crap, because they're right. If Genesis falls apart, the rest of the book falls apart too. Moderates, and believe me, because for a long time, for about a decade and a half, I was a moderate Jew. So I know the brain acrobatics required to resolve the two. Part of the Jewish culture is to seek education. Education is the way to alleviate poverty, which is why I think Jews in America, immigrant Jews in America, were so successful at bringing themselves out of the ghettos in just a few generations, where maybe other cultures haven't been so successful, because education is a part of the culture. So you've got, being raised in a moderate religious family. I'm going to Hebrew school, I'm learning about, all these stories in the Bible. And I go to regular school and, museums and stuff, and learn about the scientific method and all of the, knowledge that we've acquired via the scientific method. And I see, whoa, they don't mesh together. And there's good reason. The Bible is myth and not based on reality. The only part of reality that it's based on is the way that it manipulates human emotions into going along with the concepts in there. It's stuff you want to hear, so you're more apt to believe it. And science is, what is it? It's cold hard facts. And some of them are kind of, you don't want to believe. Like, I'm related to all the other animals on the planet. I mean, at first I was like, that's not cool. The more I thought about it, the more I was like, oh wait, that that makes a lot of sense. I see the similarity. And the similarity is even more profound when you look at the molecular level. Our DNA, the structure of the DNA of all the species on the planet is hierarchical in nature. That means that it's a branching tree structure. And it's very evident when you look at the code in the DNA. You can see how things branch off and be like, oh, okay, here we are at the bottom and we've got all these separate species. But look how, if you trace it back, you can find, common ancestors all the way back to apparently the first living thing on the planet, which was barely, you could probably barely consider it a virus, a very simple, not even single-celled organism, but some sort of self-replicating molecule back in, when proteins and amino acids were just floating around in water. And it's one of those things that's so elegant in its explanation, it just makes so much sense as soon as you understand it. But then, God making Adam and Eve out of dust. No, sorry. God making Adam and Lilith out of dust. Lilith getting banished from the Garden of Eden. And then God making Eve out of one of Adam's ribs. Okay, that just doesn't make any sense. And then they have two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, and then Cain, poof, he's gone. He disappears. What happened to him? Just left with Adam and Eve. They get banished from the Garden of Eden. And then the rest of the people are, if I remember correctly, made out of clay. And then Noah's flood happens. Noah and his family are still the people made out of clay, but then they throw rocks over their shoulders, and they make a stronger people that are made out of rocks instead of clay, and therefore less likely to be tempted by evil. I mean, one is based in reality. The other one's just a myth in order to get you to behave the way you should. So there is a conflict. Either one's wrong or the other one's wrong. They don't mesh together. Even if the Bible story is metaphorical in nature, then things that come later, like Jesus dying on the cross, don't make any sense because there's no original sin. Adam and Eve weren't real. The whole story falls apart, and the fundamentalists are right to be scared about this because they'll realize that, holy crap, this whole, this book of myths is just as weak and flawed as any other book of myths that any other culture on the planet has ever come up with, and we have no good reason to believe that it's true. What do we do now? So that's why they're scared. They're clinging to it tenaciously. Because, they've committed their whole lives to believing this thing, and they're not going to, because they're emotionally wrapped up in it. They're not going to, come to reason because their emotions are too strong. They've got loyalty to their social group, and the concepts in this book are, a part of their brain structure now because they've grown up and learned all this stuff. So they're right to be scared because if the book is false, they're left with nothing. They've wasted all that time. Their whole social structure is based on myth, and they fall apart. I mean, people mentally fall apart over stuff like that. You're talking about a whole population of people having emotional crises. And most of us atheists have gone through something similar to that. Because we do realize that it's a bunch of crap, and then we have to, rebuild that part of the brain that got discarded. Be like, holy crap, that's crap. Now what? What is there? Despair, purposelessness in life. And I think some people can't deal with it, and others can. But still, Jack, moderate, Jack. Oh, you can't have it both ways, Jack. You can't say Genesis is right. Oh, but science is right too. You can't. They're in conflict with each other. They can't coexist. I've rambled for too long. All right.